Welcome back to my series on troubleshooting your homeschool. In today's video, we're going to look at what happens when you are homeschooling out of a place of fear. Fear is one of the driving reasons why some parents start homeschooling in the first place. And unfortunately, when your homeschool is driven from a place of fear, it is going to get stressful, contentious, and it's going to be very difficult for you to find the freedom in homeschooling that you really want and that you really can have. The first fear that a lot of parents cling to is the fear of falling behind. They're afraid that their child is going to be lacking in their education because they're not moving as fast as their friends are, or maybe because they have a learning disability that makes things more difficult. And the parent feels like, but I have to keep them up with their peers. They need to move faster. They need to learn faster. We need to get through all this information this year so that they can do that next year and that next year, and they can graduate with all this stuff on their transcript. I think one of the hardest realities for parents to wrap their brains around when they first start homeschooling is the fact that there is no educational standard that your child has to meet. Even if you're in a state that has all sorts of regulations, there is still a lot of wiggle room for you to be able to customize your child's education so that they are getting an education that makes sense for them. Some kids cannot move as fast as others. And the thing to remember is that just because the schools move at a certain pace does not mean that's all the children learning at that pace. That's the reason why so many kids fall behind in public school, the reason why they're getting C's or D's or they're having to repeat a grade because it was moving so much faster than they could keep up with. That system is the problem, not the child. So when we let this fear drive our homeschool, what we're saying is the information and me being able to check these boxes is more important than my child actually learning. And I know that you don't actually believe that, but that is the way we homeschool when we're driven by this fear. Now, there is one common solution for all of the different fears that we're going to look at today, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video. So don't think that I'm just going to diagnose and then leave you with no solutions, but keep watching because you might find that there are other fears that you're also operating from that are making the whole situation even more complicated. The second fear that so many parents deal with is the idea of failing their kids. They're afraid that they, the parent, are not smart enough, that they're not going to teach them correctly, that they're going to forget something wildly important, and that their child's going to go off into the world and go, my gosh, I never learned this. And the parent's going to feel like, oh my goodness, it was completely my fault. And now their lives are ruined. When we take a step back and take a deep breath and think for a minute about all of the resources that our kids have after they leave us, okay, not just here in your homeschool, but after they go off on their own, are they really only stuck with the information that they gathered when they were with you? Of course not. They're going to be able to learn anything that they want to whenever they need to. Chances are they will be much more motivated to learn a lot of it then because they need to than they were when they were at home. The thing that our kids cannot get after they leave is the time back from their childhood that we were able to spend with them, prioritizing the things that truly mattered. If you prioritize a growth mindset, if you prioritize the skills that they need in order to be lifelong learners, and you instill them with a relationship with you that is trusting and honest and authentic and intimate, then you are providing them with all of the resources they need to go out into the world and be successful doing whatever it is that they want to do. But they cannot have a childhood again. So this fear of failing them, of not giving them what they need, you have so much less that you need to give them than you realize. The third fear that a lot of parents hold on to is the fear of the world. They shelter their kids in an unhealthy way because they are so afraid of outside influences. I firmly believe that our kids should be sheltered from certain things. They're children. They are not supposed to be exposed to the horrors of the world at a young age. They are not supposed to be exposed to harmful ideologies and harmful practices and some of the junk that is out there in the world right now when they are not fully mature enough and equipped to handle that information. So yes, there is a certain amount of sheltering that should be going on in our children's lives. However, When we homeschool to shut our kids away from the world, away from all other people, away from all other influences, that is incredibly unhealthy. Our children need to know how to interact with lots of different kinds of people. That's one of the great things about homeschooling is that it allows us to take them out and to meet different kinds of people, to go into the city, to go into other states or countries, to go meet other people who believe different things, who live a different way, so that we can show them, look, this is what the world is made of. These things are out here. These things are things that you need to be aware of. And people are people. As Christians, we need to love everyone. Now, we also need to teach our children that not everybody is doing the right thing. And we need to teach them how to be discerning. And if they're not getting an opportunity to practice the skill of discernment, to practice the skill of critical thinking and reasoning by going out into the world and seeing these things and then learning how to dialogue about them, how to think about them with us, then we really are robbing them of an incredibly important aspect of being a human being in a community of other people. And if the reason that you brought them home was because you didn't want the world to influence them at all, you wanted to completely shelter them from everything, then what you're teaching them is isolation. And isolation is not healthy. So if this particular fear has been driving you, I will say this is the one that is solved by something different than these other ones that we'll talk about. So I'll give you the solution for this one right now. The solution for this one is that you need to pray against that spirit of fear. The older I get, the more I read my Bible, the more convinced I become that fear is not an emotion, it is a spirit. It is a spirit that we need to rebuke. It is a spirit we need to cast out. That kind of fear that causes us to isolate ourselves, that causes us to separate from other people, that causes us to see people as an enemy is unholy. And I think we do our children a huge disservice when we pass on that spirit of fear about the world. I'm not going to lie, the world's a mess. There is a lot out there that is scary stuff. And to be scared is an emotion. We can feel scared. We can feel afraid of what's going on. But we need to hold on to the scripture that teaches us who is truly in control. And we need to model that for our kids. If they see us giving into that fear, then we are not preparing them with a worldview that is accurate. Because while this world is run by the prince of darkness, the whole world, the universe is run by God, and God knows what's going on. God is the one who is ultimately in control. And so his common grace is holding back the worst of it. And while things can get pretty bad, we always have the hope of Christ to cling to. If our kids do not see us modeling that and teaching them that and showing them that even though we are scared, we still need to step out in faith sometimes and do things that are scary, then we are creating them to be people who listen to fear more than they listen to the voice of God. We can't let them live that way. We cannot live that way. So if you have been holding on to the spirit of fear about the world, and that's what's been driving your homeschool, I would strongly encourage you to spend time in the Word and spend time in prayer and get with your community. Make sure that you're in church. Make sure that you are fellowshipping with other Christians on a regular basis who can help you to figure out what is this fear rooted in and how can I get this out of my life. The last driving fear that a lot of parents deal with is the fear of not being in control of their children's education. I struggled with this so much when we first started homeschooling. I felt like I needed to be the one teaching them everything. I needed to make sure they were doing things my way. We needed to do things on a specific schedule. I was holding on very tightly to every aspect of our homeschool. And not surprisingly, my kids push back against that. Nobody likes being controlled, right? Nobody likes being told you have to do this. When kids go to public school, they just know that's just the way it's going to be, that they're going to be told what to do and how to do it and when to do it. That's just how that environment works. But at home, when it is not that environment, then kids do not want to be treated that way. They don't want to be manipulated and forced to do things on a certain timeline in a certain way, learning specific things. Now, it might be that you have a compliant child who is pretty much okay with that. Like they might, there are some kids who do kind of thrive on having very strict boundaries and very predictable schedules. And if you do have a child like that, then I totally understand wanting to keep that control. However, if you don't have a child like that and you are the one that needs the control more than they do, then it's going to cause a ton of contention because they are going to push back against that feeling of, I don't have any say in what's going on. This education is just being forced on me, and I don't get to say if I am enjoying it or if we can, ask if we could do something different, or I'm really interested in this. Can we learn about this instead? When we keep that tight control, what we are inadvertently teaching our kids is that education has to look a certain way. We have to do things like this. And it can shut down a lot of their interest and a lot of their natural desire to learn, because that's kind of like a muscle. And if you don't use it, then it atrophies. So if they're not given choice, if they're not given the opportunity to give input on what's being learned or how they learn it, if they're not being allowed to follow their natural curiosity, and if their natural curiosity is not being nurtured by giving them some freedom and some ability to decide how things are going to work and what they're going to learn about and how they're going to learn about it, then that atrophies and education becomes this thing that you have to do that isn't really relevant. It's not really interesting. It's just another box to tick. And it becomes something that they're not excited about. And we don't want our kids to grow up thinking education is boring, education is lame, it's irrelevant. We want them to grow up to want to keep learning, to be willing to go and, dive into things and dig into things when they interest them, instead of just kind of waiting for someone to come along and teach them how to do everything, right? So when we hold on to that control, we are working against our children's natural desire to learn. We're shutting that down, and we are robbing them of the opportunity to take some control and have some autonomy. Autonomy and agency are incredibly important, particularly as our kids get older, particularly in those junior high and high school years. So if your children are older and you're getting a lot of pushback on this, that's probably why, because it is natural for kids at that age to start wanting more autonomy just in the first place. And when they are in the home environment where there is more of that inherent flexibility, then they're going to see, hey, we don't really have to do things this way. You're just forcing me to do things this way. And so I don't want to. And so you're going to start getting a lot more pushback. So what is the solution for these fears? How can we overcome these so that we can have more freedom and enjoyment in our homeschool? Well, all three of the fears that I talked about that I haven't given a solution for yet can all be solved with deschooling. Chances are, if you're holding on to these fears, it's because you have not deschooled yourself enough. If you have never heard of deschooling, then that is probably what the big problem is. And there are probably other things going on in your homeschool that are affected by that as well. We just haven't talked about them yet. In fact, my next video is going to be all about the different ways that not deschooling can negatively affect your homeschool. And so you may find when you watch that video, oh gosh, yep, we're dealing with that too. Oh, and that too, and that too. Deschooling is the process of detoxing your brain and your thought process from the conventional approach. And when I say conventional, I mean our typical public school approach to education. Chances are that's what you were raised with. That's what you're familiar with. You are in a society that upholds that as the standard, as the main way of educating. And so when we have that in our brain, we naturally make assumptions. We naturally gravitate towards doing things in a way that aligns with that approach. The thing is, that's only one of like 8 different approaches to education. And it is not the main approach. It is not the best approach. There is no best approach, because best is determined by a whole lot of factors. The main factor being what works for your child. The conventional approach to education does not work for the majority of children. So it is one of the main reasons why so many families struggle, because they have not deschooled themselves and gotten that mindset out of their head, so that they have the ability to fill their brain all of these other approaches and to start having some flexibility and some customization in what they're doing. So if you have never taken time to deschool, or maybe you took like 2 weeks and you were focused more on your child deschooling, because kids, if they've spent time in the public school system, they need time to deschool as well. So if you took your child home and like the next day you started in with curriculum, They never deschooled. Chances are you never deschooled. And so it is this perfect storm of everybody having all of these assumptions in their head about what education should look like. But intrinsically inside, you know this isn't what you want. And so you have to fight against that. And you do that by getting rid of that mindset. And deschooling is how you do that. Down in the description, I'm going to have links to my article on deschooling, which explains what it is, why it is so important, and how it works both for adults and for kids. And I'm also going to link to my deschooling experience. The deschooling process itself can take years. I have been homeschooling my children now for nearly 17 years. I am still deschooling. That might sound scary. You might think, well, if it's going to take me that long, why even start? Let me tell you, y'all, my homeschool is so much better than it used to be. So much better. The faster you start deschooling and the more you deschool, the better your homeschool will be. So it's not an issue of, oh, well, we're this close, we're already this far in and we haven't done it yet, so why bother? It is, we have this much time left. Let's make it the best time we possibly can by pressing pause on our homeschool for a bit and hyper-focusing on deschooling. The deschooling process can take a long time. However, that's why I created the deschooling experience. It accelerates your deschooling process by hyper-focusing you and turbo boosting all of the activities that you do so that you are getting the maximum benefit and you're able to see changes in your own mindset, your own approach, and your own philosophy of education much, much, much more quickly. Like you'll be able to see changes this coming semester, not years down the road. So the link to both of those are down in the description. I would love to hear from you if this video kind of gave you some ahas. Did you realize that you are homeschooling from a place of fear? And do you feel like you maybe have some ideas now of what you can do to help yourself get over that so that your next semester is so much better? Please like and subscribe. If you learned something, make sure you leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye.